those or topics that you'd like Flora to respond to, whether you're candidates or not. And I think we'll plan to have an open discussion, anything scoped to MGRC with maybe some preference to question and answers directed at the candidates. That sound good? Okay. So let me try to go over the short list of updates. I think that we posted on the 2nd, so that's already a couple days ago, but our final list of candidates is set. We should have everyone there. I've updated the Helios election ballot to include all of those names and double checked it. I think all that is left as far as our process is that, and let me make sure I read my notes correctly so I get the times right. Our Helios poll is going to open on September 7th. We'll send emails out to all of the CAP members to remind them of the Helios voting instructions, make sure they get it. We'll follow up as the election draws to a close, because in Helios we get to see who's voted and hasn't voted yet, even though we don't get to see the nature of their votes. And then the Helios vote closes on September 18th. And now I think that we had picked time, like exact times. Maybe this isn't the most super relevant thing. You all don't mind like off by 1 errors, but was it 10 a.m. UTC is the close on the 18th? Anthony, if you know what we picked for this, then let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to say we don't know exactly the time, but those are the days.
I will double check my notes on the time.
Okay, so if I am counting right, it's 3 candidates who are here who haven't been featured in any of the live streams. So Lawzek, Sandy, and Decentralist Dan. Is that right? If I'm missing some, then someone point it out.
This is my first meeting.
Oh, Sean, this is your first meeting. Okay, excellent. So
yes.
Mine's Zcash and Sean as well. So if you guys are up for that, then I think what I'd like to do is ask the 4 of you each to introduce yourself and yeah, speak a little bit by introduction here, and then I will lob some of the questions that we've collected from the forum to you to answer to start things off. Let's see, you want to go in the order that I called you out in then? So that would be Lawzek first.
Hi, everyone. I'm the person that's pathetically been attempting to maintain his true identity rather poorly, but that's all right. I'm here and I'm happy to participate. I like all you guys.
Awesome. Sandy, you want to say hi?
Hi, I'm Sandy. I'm putting my camera on now just to say hello. I come from the digital rights community, and I'm currently heading up something called the Internet Freedom Festival. And I'm just really excited to meet everyone. So, hello.
Awesome. Dan?
Hey guys, Dan. Happy to be here and happy to be involved in all this. And you know, I'm gonna stay anonymous for now, and as things go forward, you know, go from there. And I look forward to hearing everyone's opinions and answering some questions here.
Super. Okay, and mine's Zcash last.
Hey guys, you guys probably have seen my little green symbol around before. I've got it on the Zcash community website. I actually started mindzcash.com back in 2016 when Zcash first launched. I was really intrigued by Bitcoin and how it worked, and I'm not quite sure how I heard about Zcash, but it came across in the news thing. I joined the forums. I found everybody there to be really welcoming and help explain how the technology works, and I really just built the first website to kind of help drum up excitement for it and help the community to maybe even start mining Zcash for the first time, and then the rest is history. I'm mine Zcash on Twitter. I'm active on Discord, Keybase, on Reddit, I'm one of the main mods on the forums. Yeah, I'm just looking forward. This is the first time I've actually been on a community call and I've had my voice out there. So I just want to say hi and yeah, just let me know if you guys have any questions. Thanks.
Awesome, welcome. So I think it would make sense to ask the four candidates here then some of the, I think that, I actually can't remember now, I watched the videos, but I didn't pay attention to how closely structured the questions are. Actually, Hudson, do you think you would help me out here and let me know what are the most canonical order of questions to ask? Or if not Hudson, because who knows if he made the new link, anyone else who, let me ask it this way then, actually. So could you, I wouldn't mind even to go around and essentially do a little more detailed introduction now, especially focusing on, you know, what your background brings to what you would do within the MGRC. Could we go in the same order for that then? I put Lozak first.
Sure. So as I wrote in the forum, my experiences with essentially cannabis reform, most interactions that a cannabis community member has with their government is largely criminal. My education is more geared towards constitutional interpretation, statutory interpretation. Like I wrote on the forums, I had a student's participation in free market think tanks that I know that many are probably familiar with, Institute for Humane Studies. And when I saw the MGRC come about, it did spark my interest. It reminded me, well, I don't want to spend too much, I don't enjoy talking about myself. I'd rather talk about what I would want to do with the MGRC. I think that there is a lot of time spent on the functionality and understandably the nascent technology that blockchain and Zcash provide. But I think what is missing is connecting those people who are not do not reside on the internet and can connect these protocols with communities that actually occupy physical space. Just briefly, I recall, making my first Bitcoin purchase, in a coffee shop in New Orleans for a muffin and coffee, and it was with what I understood was happening behind the scenes. That transaction was, I don't know. I assume that a lot of us went through that sort of experience, and to fulfill what I believed was happening when I made that transaction through Zcash, through the Z chain, is what I thought was happening, and that's why I became involved in the community. And the fiscal efforts of the MGRC would separate some of the institutional failings of Bitcoin. And that's why I wanted to get involved.
You said something that I thought interesting there, and maybe you could elaborate on it a little bit more, but you pointed out physical space, you used that phrase specifically.
Well, the MGR, well, I don't want to get amorphous here. I guess that's perhaps what these are for. The way that I view what is happening now in our culture, my background is in, it's the relationship between man and state. That's where my study has been. The movement that comes out of the connectivity of, and you guys all know this, and I really hate just blabbering on, but the internet is a space of hyper revolution, and it's connected people more than it ever has before, and the coordination problems and the use of knowledge in society are flipped on their heads, and we're trying to capture a movement under the pretenses of money. But what has been lost along the way is the movement, rather than in favor of, you know, the coin casinos and money, rather than, you know, the relationship between humans and their governments. And in, you know, the long term, those will more meaningfully be understood, I think, as permissioned community governance through chains, rather than the fake democratic institutions that exist today. So to me, this is about not, you know, using it. The MGRC is certainly fiscal, but in that it's seeking to, as grants in when currencies were starting in revolutionary times, you know, these grants were used for expansion and exploitation. You know, I apologize, but you know, some government would issue grants and provide currencies and to send off into foreign lands and capture what they can. And that's how the currencies have been used. And our currencies as they existed, I want to use David Graeber's, the late David Graeber's language here, but it's evading me. But, you know, currencies of expansion and exploitation, I think, are being replaced in our society now with, you know, currencies of experience and expression. I mean, we're all wearing T-shirts more frequently today that state our political beliefs or whatnot. You know, they're more political. That's what currency is, and it's again flipped radically by the connections through the internet, and it allows for new governance structures. And it's the last few years with the bubble have really just kind of eliminated the movement side rather, and in favor of just the shitcoin casinos. So the MGRC would be a great opportunity to pick up where everyone forgot. Everyone on the internet is aware. Anyone that has a Robinhood account is aware of cryptocurrencies. That's not a fertile space. A fertile space is connecting with the real world from a governance perspective. Not that's what I would want to see done with the MGRC. That was a ramble. I apologize.
I think it was awesome. You covered lots of good ground there. Okay, so Sandy, the same question directed to you, which is tell us a little bit more about your background and how it relates to what you could do through working in the MGRC.
Sure. So like I mentioned, I come from the digital rights community. I started off as a community organizer in this space, and what I really focused on was growing the space so that it was more diverse and included more communities from all over the world, particularly those communities that were most affected and experiencing the most acute forms of surveillance and censorship. Since then, since being brought on to this wonderful community, I had the opportunity to be a funder with the Open Technology Fund, which is, you know, considered kind of a important funder within the internet freedom space, particularly the field that is dealing, you know, with activists and journalists and vulnerable communities. My interest in this is twofold. So number one, in recent years, Global South communities and other communities of color have started to really experience surveillance and censorship in a very heightened way, and it's just getting worse. And it's really exhausting and very difficult because there's huge capacity issues. They can barely keep up with serving all the emerging communities that are coming within their community or within their country or just the general region. And that doesn't even speak to emerging challenges that are coming down the road, right? So because of this, I personally think that cryptocurrency is going to have to be an area that our community really, really invests time and energy and kind of integrating into what we're doing, because right now there are definitely individuals that use it, but it's not as integrated throughout, like, you know, the various communities as much as it can, right? As you can imagine, the majority of folks, at least, I mean, I've never conducted a survey, but this is just from like talking to people, as always with any pioneer, or not pioneering, but kind of like new type of technology, it's mostly used by folks, you know, that either have like already a lot of privilege, or you know, come from, you know, Western countries. So that's really problematic, because if surveillance and censorship challenges increase, which they are, it's really, really important for this community to kind of, you know, kind of integrate this more in their work. It's also super important because, as many of you guys know, there's something called the next billion users, right? The next billion is a very coveted kind of market right now, which is scary to me because all of them come from the global South. So this, I mean, regardless of all the authoritarian kind of issues that many countries are experiencing now, they're also being targeted by marketers and, you know, different types of companies that are trying to mine their data, essentially. So for me, some of the goals I would like to see is, number one, more education and removal of barriers, so that these type of technologies can be, basically to bring more equity, so that different types of communities and, you know, different people from socioeconomic backgrounds, genders, everything else can really start kind of using, you know, or using this technology more, and understanding this technology more, and participating in this technology more. And then obviously, like, my wheelhouse is obviously creating safe and secure spaces for community growth. And obviously, like, I see everything through community lens, so I, you know, have been lurking. And even though there's really good people, like, every community has, you know, space to evolve and basically become more diverse, equitable, and safe. So that kind of is, in a nutshell, you know, kind of my perspectives and views. And in terms of background, like I said, I've been in this space now in a decade. Part of the reason I entered was because I come from open source. I've been participating in open source since, like, you know, 2004 or something like that. I kind of started with Wikipedia, and then, you know, my participation in open source has kind of evolved. Also, my family, they're refugees. I grew up in New York City. I'm a Bronx girl. I'm very excited to say that. But my family is Cuban. And of course, growing up in New York, you meet a lot of first-generation kids with families that escaped, you know, different countries for different authoritarian reasons. And a lot of it obviously has to do with surveillance and censorship. So I feel very committed to fighting this in many different ways. And I'm also the co-founder of the Internet Freedom Festival, which it seems like some of you guys have come. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we're not launching it. But it's not just the festival. We actually offer different community support systems throughout the year. And it's just a way, because you know, when you're dealing with surveillance and censorship, privacy, security, a lot of people work virtually and anonymously. And so it's just a way to create stronger trust relationships, so that the right people, right, can bond together and create strong community bonds. And that's kind of, yeah, that's it. So I'm going to stop talking there.
Awesome. Could I actually ask a question following up on one point you mentioned? Do you have some examples of, like, what you think would be, like, good ways that the MGRC, through the grants, through or whatever it can do, would say bring about the use of Zcash to actually empower people who are marginalized or need it?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, it's hard to answer because my approach is so based on community feedback, right? So one of the first things that I think should be that you guys should invest in is basically community research, to basically talk to different communities and say, hey, like, why aren't you more involved in this? What are your current needs? What do you think that this can do for your community? So basically you're looking at three things, right? Number one, what are they telling you that they need, right? And you folks as experts in Zcash or like in the ecosystem of cryptocurrency, you're going to be able to better identify like how or provide education and how your particular product can fulfill some of the needs these communities are having. And then, like I mentioned to you, if you do not know what the barriers of entry are, then it's really, really hard to set up educational tools to kind of remove those barriers, right? And it may not just be education, even though a lot of the times it is education, because there's always a knowledge gap. Knowledge gaps are like one of the biggest issues with equity, right? And so I do think that's one of the biggest challenges that you folks are facing, right? But also sometimes it's just resource, right? Like, you know, my family is Cuban. So like in Cuba, for example, there's a lot of innovation. Like, you know, the Havana Mesh Network is like fucking amazing, right? But getting software is very difficult because you don't have credit cards, right? So a lot of times it's just establishing trust relationships with the communities that you're trying to cultivate and really listening, taking a step back and listening. And then once you listen, then you can kind of craft your strategy around it. I don't know if that answered your question, because I know
it counts. No, that was perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so Dan, same question over to you. So elaborate a little bit more on your background and in particular what it means for what you think you'd be able to do through the MGRC.
All right, cool. I guess I'll start by saying I'm not very good at speaking about myself, similar to what Mine Zcash said, but I'll give it a go here. I'm basically just a pseudonymous Zcash holder and a community member in several of the online spaces. And, you know, honestly, I don't have any technical credentials or previous job experience in the crypto space outside of just being involved in the community. But my day job is actually as a freelancer in the broadcast television space. And not that that is relevant whatsoever, but we have a union, a labor union, to represent us all. And I was elected to, as a trustee to that board. And I feel that that probably is the most relevant experience I have that I could bring to the MGRC, because in that role, representing our union members, I'm responsible to work with our treasurer and help decide how the union's funds are allocated and distributed. And you know, that comes along with doing quarterly audits, presenting at our union meetings every month, etc. And I sort of took it upon myself in that role to interact with all of our union members in order to just kind of gauge and inform them, you know, where the funds are going, how they want to see what direction our union will head in, you know, how the funds will be allocated to our different areas. And even though, like I said, I don't have any experience in the crypto space generally, I feel that I could probably bring something different as far as being only a community member and not someone who has worked in the space or been paid in general to be involved.
I guess your background on unions is pretty interesting. I wonder if you would, do you see parallels between the kinds of challenges you think that the MGRC would face in the Zcash community to, like, as an organization, what unions and their funding have to deal with?
Sure, yeah. I think that there's a lot of crossover there, and that it is, you have to take into, you know, there's only a certain amount of elected people that are on the board of trustees. We obviously have other roles as as I mentioned, the treasurer, the business manager, etc. I have to work with all of the people who have been elected as leaders in our union, as well as trying to, like I said, inform and work with members who may not, let's say, come to the union meetings, or they don't get on our community calls. And when I'm at work, I try to gauge and inform them on, how to be more involved and gauge their sentiment, even if they don't want to be involved going forward. How can I take what they're telling me and bring that to the union meetings that I do attend? And I think that, I guess the analogy would be me on our job sites interacting is similar to, say, my student anonymous accounts interacting with community members, and then bringing that to the MGRC.
Yeah, awesome. Mine's Zcash. Okay, so same question. Elaborate a little bit more on your background and put it in the context of what MGRC can do.
Okay. Well, as far as my day-to-day work goes, I can't really elaborate on that much, just because I'm still trying to remain somewhat pseudonymous throughout this whole process. But I've ever since I started with Zcash, I've been somewhat of a privacy proponent for a while. But as far as I'm also not a very good public speaker, as you can probably tell. I'm a lot better on paper than I am on microphone. But the main reason I wanted to get involved in the MGRC is to help the community fill in some of the gaps that I've seen. And that's just stuff like I mentioned in my post, which was what I call the last mile problem. Just seeing protocol improvements happening all of the time. There's still quite a bit of gaps that I see that from the end user experience, and stuff like developers that need tooling to help them support Zcash shielded stuff, wallets, even just how to transact safely, especially with the fact that we have so many T and Z addresses. There needs to be a good education for all of them, for everybody to take their funds from a T address and spend them and put them in a Z address and maintain that privacy. So as far as like my personal stuff goes, I'm probably not going to be able to elaborate on that very much.
I'll tell you what, I would even refine a bit to that. I think that you've been running for a long time in the Zcash community, some of the widely used communication infrastructure. So I actually think just within the pseudonymous scope of mine Zcash, I think you have a lot of background that could be brought to bear in the MGRC.
Well, thank
Do you think that those viewpoints give you anything that the MG? I'm trying to find a way to cast this to a easier question to talk about. Some of the other questions like procedural, or I guess it would be called procedural rules, but are about the interaction of the MGRC and the community. So maybe you'd be in a unique position to have thoughts on how the MGRC should interact with the rest of the Zcash community.
Yeah, well, the MGRC has a good opportunity to, provide feedback and direction for the grantees, as well as the people that are on it can hopefully become mentors and advisors to the grant applicants. But as far as, I'm losing my train of thought. So, but I'll just leave it there.
Okay, fair enough.
So Sean, I've got to jump in here for a second. I know that you said that you're shy and you're not a good public speaker, but I disagree. And I also want to just draw community attention to the fact that you are one of the most outstanding community members I've ever seen in any crypto project ever. The stuff that you've done for Zcash dating back since the beginning is just above and beyond. And I think this community is really blessed to have you aboard. And I truly appreciate everything you do for this community. Thank you.
Thank you for saying that. And like I said, I'm one of those guys that is more of a keyboard and computer guy. I don't necessarily have a good public speaking presence, so I apologize on that. But I'll sit there and write 5 paragraphs of information and expound on stuff well. But when I'm put on the spot, I do tend to get nervous and clam up. So But yeah, anyhow, thank you.
That's awesome. Not only do I agree with everything DC said, but even on the microphone, I think you're doing great. So take with that what you will. Okay, so I'd like to loop around to a different question. I want to use the moderator privilege a little bit to ask, I think, the kind of same form of the question, maybe from a different point of view. I'd like to ask each of you what you think would make like a very good MGRC recipient. You have specific examples of mind of what you would look for in a kind of team or company or individual or volunteer or whatever would be a recipient of a major grant. Yeah, that's roughly how I would like to frame the question. I think I'd like to go in the same order for that then, if you don't mind. So, Lazak?
So like I was attempting to say earlier, I think that an untapped area for all digital communities is the physical realm. And what I would like to see from an applicant is something that's bold, and I'm sure that other people have thought about it, what their dream scenario would be. But, and I'm not trying to, again, expand too much on how I personally feel that society is going, but just consider that, there's eviction moratoriums. And I assume that those in the San Francisco area and the Bay Area are familiar with how local governments can really eliminate some of your property rights. And should there be proposals that would require a great deal of capital, physical locations for short-term housing with entities that are willing to stage those areas, which seems very trendy these days. If you notice in the short-term rental markets, those have, through this pandemic, have actually, the prices of those sorts of rentals have skyrocketed. And also there's alternative land uses for more communal living. And I think that I would be interested in a proposal that, again, expands the digital community to the physical space. And it's something that I appreciate all of the research intensive grant seekers, but I just feel that, these permissions have to be used by real people. You perhaps saw the technoanthropy from the guy from AEI, who is going to be seeking, he was interested in MGRC in that it would allow this sort of knowledge to pass down through the public intellectuals, and the other communities certainly did that with the Bitcoins. They use those sorts of club academic spheres to spread those coins. And that's what I think is missing because our communities cannot survive if they live online only. That's it.
Awesome. I like that answer. In the middle, I was even thinking of trying to bring up the technothropy and would have interjected it, except I couldn't figure out how to pronounce it, but I was going to ask you to react to that, and that was perfect. Okay, so Sandy, same question to you. Do you have archetypal examples of who you would like to see funded through the MGRC program?
Well, I think it won't be a surprise if I say that I would like to see more communities at risk being funded that can obviously really take advantage of this technology. But I think that as you're trying to build things out, I think you have to be really open. And so instead of necessarily looking for specific projects, I think that there's a specific approach you can take, right? So that kind of ensure that everyone that you're kind of approving or kind of saying, yes, I believe in this project and we're going to support you, is actually going to be successful, right? So there's certain things I look in projects. Number one, have they done their research and homework, right? Most of the projects that I've seen fail are just projects that are like one person that's like, oh, I have this great idea, but then they don't do any type of research, right? So it's really, really important that, they're doing research, they're understanding what's already out there, they're learning, from past failures of maybe similar projects. They're also understanding who they're serving and that they're talking to the people that they're serving, ensuring that whatever they're producing is going to be used, right? And it's going to have an impact. Obviously, it goes without saying, like making sure the tech is open source and that the projects are open to be audited. In terms of like management, I have this really annoying thing with tech that a lot of times they will put tech people in management roles or project management positions, and they really don't have those skills. So really ensuring that the teams that you're looking to invest in really have a diversity of skills, and that at least one person on the team has project management skills, because just because you have a good idea does not mean that you're going to be successful if you can't implement it and manage the day-to-day things that go along with having a project, right? And I'm trying to think of other things. Yeah, and again, like I'm kind of repeating myself, but really I look at any type of project as having an impact, not just on, or being successful, not just for the specific team that you're funding, but also ensuring that it has some positive good outside of their project, right? So whether it's contributing code back, to the open source community, whether it's, they have, they're working with a specific community that has never really been exposed to certain technologies. So making sure that it's not just about like a one-off thing, but that it's going to have an amplification effect, right? And that's it.
Do you have any, I would imagine that one of the things you could bring, given your experience with existing established nonprofits in the internet freedom and related space, is an opportunity to do projects in partnership with them, or otherwise somehow, through partnerships with other existing nonprofits in that space, get some kind of better leverage or experience or effectiveness that way. Do you have any specific ideas for partnerships that would make sense?
Yeah, I mean, everything. So my approach is always very collaborative, because I think that when you collaborate with people, everybody wins, right? And so the internet freedom community, at least like the folks that I deal with within, my particular project, which is actually quite expansive, they're all used to collaborating. So like, for example, I could imagine doing weird collaborations as well, right? So like, just to give you a perfect example, women journalists, especially within the Global South, but women journalists all over, experience the most intense forms of online harassment, right? And to top it off, right, are not as economically successful as their counterparts, right? It would be super interesting to see the innovation that would come out of bringing folks that like focus on online harassment within, women journalists, and like really like maybe one or two really good technologists that like really understand blockchain and like cryptocurrency, to see what they imagine, right? And the reason I say this is because like a lot of times like innovation is not just something, and I hate the word, by the way, I apologize for using the word in advance because I fucking hate it. Like in New York, it's used all the time and it's like, it drives me fucking crazy. But it's like innovation in its true sense, like you're producing new things. That happens when you're collaborating with people that have real needs, right? That have never been met before, that have never been addressed before. And within the internet for community, there's so many groups. There's thousands and thousands of groups that are dealing with different types of surveillance and censorship. For me, harassment is a type of censorship, right? So those partnerships, yeah, there's tons that's possible and actually could be very, very exciting and very fruitful. Again, I don't know if I answered your question because I'm a little nervous, but yeah.
No, it's perfect. Okay, Dan, same question. Who do you think you would like to fund? What would you look for in a grant recipient or a major grant proposal?
All right. At the most basic form, I think I'm just most interested in applicants that are going to help grow the Zcash community and specifically the Z2Z ecosystem. And then I'll go on to say, and I have this in my candidacy post on the forum, but if I had to break it down to 3 points that sort of touch on that, it would be shielded pool growth. I'm very much looking forward to applicants that are going to be building, towards multi-sig, looks like to be potentially using Frost. But I really believe that both shielded and transparent multi-sig is very important for the ecosystem and just for increased security, usability, and it will just allow for more trustworthy custody, personal spending, and saving of Zcash. And I believe it'll build trust in the ecosystem as well, as far as holding even large or small amounts, like I said, for either spending or saving. And I also think that then applies to number 1 for growing the shielded pool. And then something else that I'm very interested in is, I'm not very tribalistic. I'm involved in the Bitcoin ecosystem as well. And I'd like to see things that are focused on symbiosis between Bitcoin and Zcash. I think there could be a lot of interoperability between the two, economically, community-wise, et cetera. And also to touch back on growing the community, I think getting the Bitcoin community is large, as we all know, and I think it would benefit us to reach out to that community and try to get some converts on board. I also, I'm open to all applicants. I'm excited to see everything. I'm not only going to be voting on some applicants that only touch on those 3 things, and so in that regard, I think learning from and hearing from the other candidates that are elected, how, which applicants are you excited about, and give me the pitch and why is this something I should be excited about. So, I think that those few things would probably answer that question, I hope.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I want to ask a slightly different form of question. I think, again, using a bit of moderator privilege here. Maybe this will kind of be like a group together question. I'd basically like to ask you all about your Zcash regarding thoughts. So this can include, I'd love to hear a story of your usage of Zcash. Like, have you paid for anything with Zcash or otherwise had a firsthand user experience with it? And if so, what are your reactions to that? Maybe in the context of, again, what could be improved on or what MGRC should do. And I guess that's it. Maybe if you don't have such an experience, you could then otherwise talk about, say, why Zcash or what you view are the most important opportunities for Zcash that MGRC could bring about.
Andrew, do you think this question should be directed to all the candidates versus, right now you've been concentrating on the first 4 of us?
Yeah, you think that seems like that's one of the questions that was posted recently or related to a question posted recently. So if no one's answered a question like that, it'd be fun to go through all the candidates who are there. If I don't hear any negative reactions to that meta process, I say we go with that. How about then we start with the same? Well, okay. I would like to hear. Does anyone wish to respond to that and wants to volunteer as a candidate and not one of the other 4 already, just for the sake of
I can.
And breaking it up?
This is Chris. I can jump in.
Awesome. Go for it.
And I might in part answer the prior question too. So I am an investor and writer in the space, and aside from diligencing or researching the new things that come out, I've never used Zcash to purchase a good or to protect my privacy. I think that in part the focus and I think Sandy said this really well, and a few other people said this as well, including mine, Zcash. Focus for me is really nailing down the last mile, and it's the last mile to developers, and then communities at risk, because they don't have economic freedom, or communities at risk because they're at risk of losing their economic freedom. And so, on the developer side, it's a lot of the tooling and putting out applications that make a lot of sense to solve people's real world needs, which then integrates with the last mile to communities at risk. And I'm actually in the midst of crafting a Zcash thesis and for placeholder. And one of the things it's centering on is something that Zuko put out of most people in crypto and just broadly have privacy backwards, of we're really focused on privacy of our actions and transactions. But if we can have a private resource store, then we can transact more transparently and efficiently. And so, part of the dream here for me with Zcash is if Zcash could be a world private resource store that then basically connects in, and I'm very crypto focused and have a fear about my own myopic view there, but if Zcash can connect to start into things like Ethereum or a number of these other smart contract platforms where it is the really private, secure resource store, then it's kind of this Fort Knox, right, resource, and then it goes into all these other economic freedom pursuits. So that focus on the last mile is really important for me. The other thing I would say in terms of recipients from the MGRC, my mind's really not made up that it should all be grants. I'm actually really intrigued at the combination of grants, prizes, and investments, and tailoring that. And while I know that there's some resistance on the forum because the zip was one way, I really, given my time in the crypto space, want to be careful of how quickly we ossify, because we just have no idea really how a lot of this is going to go. And so what was being said earlier about listening is super key. And I think Mario from my team said it something like, we can't assume these things. We really have to gather the data and tailor the strategy. And so as it stands with regard to like grants, prizes, and investments, I see grants as being like the things that are really hard engineering problems, or that no one else will really touch and that aren't going to happen and won't be funded any other way. And that's where a grant is really good, and you allow that is always open for someone to apply for if they can't get money in another way, but it's a core problem that Zcash thinks it can help with. A grant is a great fit. The prizes are more, dollar for dollar, you get more work from prize programs than grant programs, because you can put out a North Star and say, hey, everyone in the world compete for this prize. And then so you get all of this kind of competition and the innovation that goes around it to get the prize. And then when the project is delivered, you're getting the project delivered when you hand over the prize money, which is very different from grants. And some of this comes from past experience of Placeholder helping prior crypto projects with grants programs. And then the last one is the investment side. And investments really come about when there's an opportunity for Zcash to compound its own capital to continue this mission around economic freedom. And it's not for Zcash to become a venture arm. I think there's a lot of fat foundations in the crypto space, and I think it pains many of us on this call to see some of the behavior that goes on in the crypto space. It's really more to have this treasury of decadal capital for this economic freedom fight, and making sure that this opportunity for 20% of the rewards to be, or 40% of the 20% to come to MGRC, or whatever we're going to call it, is a really big opportunity, and it's one that we need to roll into being sustainable and not just a 4-year stint.
Awesome response, thanks. Do any other MGRC candidates who haven't spoken yet want to react to that question, which is something about your personal Zcash experience, what you've observed, and what you think are the most important opportunities for MGRC to improve something?
I could jump in.
Yeah, sure, let's go ahead.
Cool. So let's see. I guess the question started with like experiences using Zcash. So I've used Zcash in a few ways. I use it most days to send a message over the network using Zbay, which is my project. So I have some kind of daily interaction with it, which is kind of nice. The most kind of concrete thing I've used Zcash as a currency for is there have been some users on Zbay who've, mostly folks within the Zcash community, who've posted items for sale. I got this book from Boston Zcash, which was posted for sale. With the for sale post was actually a Z2Z transaction sent to a Zcash address whose incoming viewing key or whose full viewing key was shared across all Zbay clients, so that there's a kind of store address that people can see messages at. And there's a special format for posting messages for sale, so you can see items for sale. That's maybe a little too much detail, but that's how I got the book. As far as, I mean, I think the other main way that I've used Zcash is just as someone trying to build something on it and make something on it. And that's been a pretty kind of cool experience. There's sort of been two poles. The one side is, whoa, there's this existing thing that actually, well, we made a prototype, and within a few weeks, we were able to send messages over a peer-to-peer network to other users with end-to-end encryption. And even users who are not online yet, which is kind of really hard to do with peer-to-peer messaging in most contexts. And we were able to send money privately, and there's a huge degree of metadata protection that's, you know, given there are extreme scaling constraints on that, but there's also right now, but that degree of metadata protection is pretty unheard of in peer-to-peer messaging apps, not at least ones that can deliver to offline users. So that was really cool. And then moving into refining it, there were, you know, there are a lot of gotchas and special cases that we ran into that I think are going to bite users, anyone who's trying to use Zcash in production, for example, or now we're working with a lot with the Light Wallet stack. And, you know, there are some issues there that could bite developers working with the Light Wallet stack. So, although most of these are resolvable, so there's this kind of tension between you can get started and build something, but there are a lot of details and gotchas, but you can address this and fix them, but it would probably be best if resources of the community as a whole were sort of oriented towards making that easier, towards building these tools to be easier and easier to use. And yeah, in terms of my vision for where this can go, I mean, I think that the key is that, that we're building a private currency, and that I think we know just from our sense of the world that privacy is an important value in technology, and that it's not just really about privacy, it's about systemic integrity. Like none of the systems that we think of and use every day would really work right if all of the data was just out there for anyone to do whatever with. And so being able to build, and at the same time, we know that centralization carries with it a really huge risk of usually legacy institutions coming into some kind of position of power and control. And so being able to do both decentralization and privacy at the same time, we know is hugely important for society and for individual freedom. And it's really hard. And we have an opportunity, we already have an amazing start at building a solution to it. And yeah, I think there is a really significant last mile problem in terms of getting this technology to people who can benefit from it, and also making it really easy to build more high level tools with. So I think the opportunity for Zcash is that in the privacy tool space, there are so many peripheral considerations that someone's privacy is only exists to the extent that you've managed to stop enough data leaks that that a person can feel that the person has a practical level of not guarantee, but certainty or belief that they can execute some task without leaking enough data that that the risk is too great. And if in making a privacy project, or in making a privacy tool, there are enough of those micro considerations that once a tool manages to address enough of them and become the best way to do something, it's very hard for other projects to catch up with that tool. And so we see a lot of foundational tech like Tor, where there could be better solutions to that. But the fact that that is battle tested and that has, in so many specific leaks and special cases, have been addressed over the years, means that any new tool would have a really, really hard time to catch up. I think that resolving all of the privacy leaks in Zcash can create really powerful network effects that make Zcash the thing that people use for privacy, which then creates a virtuous cycle where more and more attention goes into this ecosystem and the privacy gets even stronger and more unstoppable. So that's the opportunity here and what I hope to achieve with in my participation on the MGRC.
Awesome response. Okay, I'll tell you what, we had such a high entropy first 10 minutes of this call, and I felt like it was super structured for the last half hour or so. So twisting the dial in between, same prompt, but any candidate can volunteer whether they are the four who we focused on earlier in the call or any of the other candidates who have been on another live stream but not gotten to respond to this particular question, which, to remind, is any personal using experience of Zcash that you'd care to share and insights it's led you to, and something about the best opportunities you see for Zcash and for the MGRC.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Zcash.
That's how we know that we've set the entropy to the right level, is we get about 2.
No, Hudson, I'm interested in hearing about your Zcash usage. Please go ahead.
Sure. So as far as Zcash usage goes, for fun, I was mining it when Zcash launched, tuning into the awesome, kind of grainy but awesome live stream that was happening. But beyond that, I haven't used Zcash for a lot, and I think part of that is because it was really difficult for a while to use Z addresses compared to doing something like Monero or like even other types of privacy transactions or just using my money a different way. I know that's improved a lot. I've been following some of the improvements and speeding up, how Z addresses or Z transactions, I should say, get created. But I think there is still a usability problem, and what I'd like to focus on, if I get on the MGRC and work with the others, is stuff around usability. Things I'm excited about are making sure that people understand the value proposition and how it can really help them in their communities and in their, how people understand how important privacy is. But beyond that, I think that there needs to be maybe a little less focus on the tech a lot of the time, because we have a lot of advancements in the tech that's happening, but then I don't see a lot of marketing. I don't hear about Zcash a lot. And so we can, from like an inside the cryptocurrency community perspective, you have always Zcash versus Monero, but even beyond that, there's now stuff coming out with these smart contract platforms where you have stuff like Aztec and ZK Sync and other technologies that allow for arbitrary, programmable money functionality that is shielded, just like Zcash transactions are shielded, but at a much bigger level. And so people are thinking these layer 2 technologies that are on top of things like Cardano and Ethereum and stuff like that are going to really sweep Zcash away. And I don't really think that should happen. I think there's a big case for base layer privacy that isn't being talked about enough. And I think there's a lot of good that can come of this. And when I say that maybe focus on the tech list, I don't mean that we should suddenly go all in on marketing without something being as good as it could be. I think what comes with usability is both a marketing perspective and a tech improvement perspective. So just as one last thing, I know Chris mentioned the idea of having more than just grants, having stuff like prizes. I think that's a really interesting idea, and I've seen that work in ways that grants haven't worked in other capacities. However, we would need to change the zip, most likely, which can definitely be done. I think we can work very quickly to set up structures to have these decisions made and to change the zip in ways that we want, so we're not stagnant or ossify at all. Yeah, so thanks everybody, and that was the end of my answer.
Thanks, Hudson.
Oh, Andrew, you're muted.
Good. Thanks for checking. That was mumbling the answer anyway. I wanted to ask a follow-up about if you had specific examples on like how, like, what do you envision marketing could look like through the MGRC? Like, would this be like a grant to a project that's aimed at marketing or a partnership in some way?
It would be so basically if a custom, like maybe marketing firm, I don't have enough experience with marketing to be honest, but like in my vision of it, I guess, would be if a marketing firm that specializes in these kind of things that align with our values come along, I think that'd be something worth considering funding. And then beyond that, some anyone that comes with grassroots efforts to support privacy in their communities. So like maybe someone who's going out to any of the number of protests around the world, and they have like a grassroots community effort in order to spread the idea of privacy and financial privacy and things like that during protest. That could be something where small grants are given out for that. So you're kind of starting from like these low-level grassroots ways all the way up to the higher level professional marketing ways. So I think it's going to be impossible to get the world to understand how important privacy is until it's too late, maybe, but we can at least try, and we can at least make a really good effort for that through the technology that we're building.
Yeah, I wanted to, this is ML. I wanted to tack on to what Hudson said. It's not the note. So I think most of us on this call believe that privacy is freedom. And, you know, it seems obvious to most of us. But when I talk to my friends about what I do to protect some amount of privacy, their instant reaction is, oh, well, I have nothing to hide. What do you have to hide? So instead of privacy is freedom, in a lot of people's minds, privacy is guilt. There's a presumption that you have something to hide, and you know that the police should have access to whatever you're doing because you sound very guilty just by wanting privacy. I think you see this also in the corporations that I think are out. I'm based in Asia, so if you have a Samsung phone, I think what you'll notice is a lot of the default permissions and sharing are on in a way that I think feels uncomfortable for somebody like myself, who's very tuned into not oversharing information. I think out here, people exchange their privacy, their identity in exchange for very little. And I think it's just the way people were brought up to believe that if you have nothing to hide, then you shouldn't be afraid that the powers that be have access to your information. So I think something that I would be keen on funding would be with kind of a success model. You need people to understand that privacy is freedom. Then you need them to understand how crypto, and then specifically Zcash, can support that goal. I think for me, the biggest domino in my part of the world is understanding that privacy is freedom. And I think one way we could spend our funds is find the people out here who were in many ways OG crypto because they believe that it will help them protect their privacy, and then pair them up in the same way Hudson mentioned with maybe an agency or some sort of organization that has a platform for them to market, so to speak, this message of privacy being freedom. Because I think if we don't start at this very basic individual level where we have normal people on the street understand that privacy is freedom, we'd be fighting a losing war, because nobody on the street would want privacy, because they think if they tell people they want privacy, then they are guilty of something.
Awesome, thank you.
May I answer that question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So back to Zcash usage. I'm a miner, I'm a holder. I get other people to invest in the club, hold Zcash. We are 95% Zcash. In terms of the technology, I think we're already here. We have shielded wallets already sending messages Z to Z via mobile. So we really have no excuse. And I think the flywheel has set us up for this occasion to take the adoption up and do some marketing, but we have to do it safely, securely. We can't overpromise We can't promise things that we don't have. I wouldn't necessarily market towards protesters. It's a little politically sensitive. I don't want to engage on either side of the spectrum. But in terms of pushing adoption, like I said, I think we have Z addresses on mobile now with messages. So, and we have reference wallets. So we should really have grant recipients employ the tools and the code bases we have today and build out the feature sets. So what we've been doing in my minor grant review committee, where I just give out Zcash to help build out these tools, I think one of the most important cornerstones is a Z address directory, because as new users come on board, they want to come on board with a network of other users. So when you open a Zcash app, you start from zero. You have zero address, you get a Z address, you don't have any friends. A public Z address directory solves a network effect problem. So if we can integrate that into every app in a safe and secure way, we will generate network effects immediately. So I think that is one of the first things we should fund. And like I said, we have to be careful with the marketing. So I propose that we integrate security review in our grant review process so that when we do market the things that come out of our funnel, they are secure and they are safe to use. And if you read my proposal, I have some pretty in detailed plans about that. I'd love to discuss that towards the end of this call.
Sure, excellent. We could probably do that in excellent response. I'm enjoying this line of question. Could we do a couple more? Any other MGRC candidates want to?
I'll jump in real quick, Andrew.
Yeah.
Just riffing on ML's comment that privacy equals freedom. I think it's not until you live somewhere where you can observe that shift that you really feel it. So I lived in Hong Kong for a couple of years after the handover back from the Brits, but at a time when one country, two systems was very real, and the people of Hong Kong enjoyed tremendous amounts of economic freedom, but also a significant amount of social freedom and freedom from surveillance on the part of the Chinese government. And what we've seen, we've all seen this happening, even it's made headlines even here in the US, but particularly when you speak with people in Hong Kong, they've had uprisings going on long before COVID that are a direct response to an increase of control being asserted by the Chinese government. And the technological component to this surveillance can't be ignored. And some people watch that and say, oh, well, that couldn't happen here. But then you see what we've seen unfold here in the US over the past several months as well. And it really makes you wonder. It used to be years ago, like I used PGP for my email starting in like 1990 something, and then later S-MIME because it had a really tight integration with mail clients. So like it would just encrypt and you didn't have to worry about it. And people would look at me funny, be like, why are you encrypting your email? I was like, well, because it's very important that we have end-to-end privacy for these communications. And they're like, there is no way that anyone's hoovering up all that data. Just no way, impossible. And then fast forward a couple of years and it's revealed that they're absolutely doing that. And they're doing it without due process. They're doing it without authority from our legislators. They're doing it in secret and they're doing it at scale. So I think it's very important that the technology that we're building exists, but I also want to appreciate and highlight what Sandy has said and what Makara said about you've got to have a product vision. You've got to take this technology that does amazing things, but you need to connect it to people that have a real need for it. And you need to meet them where they are. You need to bring it to them in a fashion where it's easy for them to consume and to do things that they're already doing, but to now do them with privacy built in a very seamless fashion. So I think it's very important for us not to nerd out on like, can we spend 4 years and $30 million building a faster snark, right? We don't want to give up on R&D, but I think we need to take the technology that we already have. We need to make it more usable. We need to connect it with people that will directly benefit from it in support of the mission. And adopt product best practices to do that. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Makara said that Maker and Cello are doing a really good job of applying like Silicon Valley style product management to make their products really resonate with folks. And I think we should take pages out of those SV product playbooks and apply them to our project. Because I think for a long time, we've had this reputation of being a prof coin. Like we've got amazing science, but until very recently, if you wanted to send a shielded transaction, you literally had to use a full node on the CLI and format your parameters very carefully as JSON. We've come a long way since then, but we still have a long way to go. And I really look forward to seeing this panel be seated with 5 folks that are able to execute on that and to do it for the long haul.
If I can contribute another thought here. When I was working at Anchorage, we had conversations with fund admins who refused to allow Zcash transactions. And I think people in the community will remember about a year ago, OKEx delisted all their 5 privacy coins, including Zcash. I think before we are able to help people who need privacy, like David just described, we have to be widespread enough such that people who use these coins can't suddenly be shut down, in which case then we stop being a truly useful asset for them, since there are many points of failure for them. So I think the point I wanted to make was we do need to do our own background homework in creating an ecosystem where we're not just available Z transactions on any small handful of venues. We need to be, I think, focused on having diversity in where people can use Z transactions.
Yeah, I agree with that completely, and I think there seem to be sort of 2 sides to it. One is, well, maybe 3, but one is a kind of just general biz dev side where those relationships need to be made to push exchanges over the edge into doing it. The other is perhaps like a more kind of legal and policy side where we're looking for what the actual legal blockers are, but I think there's a central piece that's maybe the most important, which is the narrative piece of it, where we need to position, Zcash needs to position itself in such a way that it can shift the narrative around Zcash towards the obvious point that no centralized service would ever consider Bitcoin level privacy acceptable. Like PayPal is never going to build something where everybody can see everybody's transactions. That would just never happen. And so if we're thinking about making decentralized analogs to these services, they need to have privacy. This isn't some weird thing we're doing. This is just a basic starting point. I mean, that's one way of formulating it, and there are others probably, but we need to have the way you win these political fights, and I say this from my background as having done a pretty good job of winning some of them on issues like net neutrality and site blocking in the US in my role as a co-founder and co-executive director of Fight for the Future, which is like a US-based activism organization that's done some really good work. The way you win these fights is you build the narrative first, you build the case and the story first, and then you look for the bottlenecks and the specific policymakers or bits of legislation or the specific levers you need to pull or pieces you need to move in order to get the result you want. But the narrative is the most important thing by far. And my only doubt about MGRC investing in it, and I think I would take this question really seriously on the MGRC, if I was on the MGRC, is that this kind of work is actually really hard and actually kind of expensive relative to the MGRC's budget. Like to get a big enough civil society ecosystem really driving the narrative, you need to have quite a lot of people in a position to work full time on it, just because it's hard work. And it's something on the order of like $500,000 or $1 million to really fund a civil society ecosystem at the level where even pretty lean groups can add up to make a difference on something like that. So, once you get down into kind of smaller grants, you can do some cool stuff and you might have an amazing hit. It's almost like it's probably worth swinging for the fences and trying for a viral hit, but it's hard to really guarantee that you're going to make substantive change to the overall narrative with smaller amounts of funding. So it's a little bit of a risky endeavor. That's my only kind of doubt about that approach or that kind of project.
Can I take more open volunteers to react to any of the topics thus broached, or to answer the Zcash usage and best opportunities for Zcash? Maybe I'll say I'll take volunteers from anyone, but maybe with preference to either someone who hasn't spoken at all yet or one of the 4 candidates on this call who wasn't on the earlier live streams.
I can jump in. I'll just make it quick to touch on the using Zcash. I don't generally like to spend my Zcash. I'm still sort of in accumulation mode here, but
you can send it back and forth.
Send it back and forth, right? I did buy one thing. I did use Zcash for spending. Well, I after reading Michael, I believe he's on here. Michael Harm's Medium post about buying a domain privately with, I believe it's pronounced Najala. I'm not sure, but I bought a domain name on that. Also, shout out to Michael Harms. He walked me through how to send Send Many message transaction, which was real cool. And then sending and reading messages on ZEC pages. And I also use the Zec Wallet Lite to onboard no coiners and try to get some new Zcashers and get them to download, send them the link, get them to download and send them a little Zec with a tiny little message. And I'd say similar to what VR sentiment seems to be, I'm most excited about Z2Z community growth. I'll just end it there.
Awesome. More volunteers on this. I'm hoping to go for another 5 or 6 minutes or so. Maybe that's a couple of responses.
I want to jump in and make, Andrew, is that we as a community, we get a lot of flack for not having Z2Z only. The transparent mode of Zcash, I think, is the cause of more scrutiny than anything else that we get. And I want to tell you my experience where I probably spend more time than anyone else at ECC doing product research and interacting with anything and everything out there. And my experience has been that if you store Zcash in a shielded wallet over time and you interact with unshielded Zcash, you pay for things Z to T, you actually enjoy a significantly higher amount of on-chain privacy than you do if you transact T to T. So I think a lot of folks focus on why are shielded transactions only 2% of total transactions? And I think if they had that experience that I had of holding Zcash long-term over time in a shielded wallet and then transacting with it, you buy a VPN with it, you buy some N95 masks with it, your on-chain privacy is actually far more robust than most people think. And you would never know this unless you spent some time trying to follow the breadcrumbs through the blockchain.
Great point, thanks. Any other candidate volunteers to respond to the most recent question? On Zcash usage stories and the most important opportunities for Zcash as a whole, including the MGRC.
So I have one more thing to add on that. I really think it's important for us to have control over the quality of applications that reach the ecosystem. And 2 ways to do that is to offer trust badges. For example, a shielded security seal for applications that use Zcash correctly, whether it's Z to Z or Z to T. And by doing that, we can attract new grants in order to earn that seal. And so it solves the marketing problem as well as solves the security problem while attracting new applications that want the shielded feature. And so if we can offer that as the MGRC, a pay with Zcash button or a security seal of sorts, we may be able to attract grant applicants and new applications easier without, maybe even more effectively than offering prizes. That's all I got.
All right, I'm pausing to see if there's more volunteers who want to jump in among the candidates and just shout it out. Maybe like waiting for a long enough.
Yeah, I can
speak
a little bit.
Go ahead.
So one of the experiences I ran into, I tried to open up one of the first, or actually the only Zcash swag shop, after getting permission from the ECC, of course. And one of the things I quickly realized was there's very few providers out there that make plug-and-play solutions for internet shop owners, and that's where I said in my application that I wanted to hire developers to help build the tooling. I mean, whether there's SDK or API or whatever, that to make the acceptance level that Bitcoin has as good as at least, even if it's initially T address and then eventually Z address, but Z address would be ideal, of course. And try to get, like, there's some major players out there. Like the only one that I could find for the store was Coin Payments, and Coin Payments only accepted T addresses. And if we could get those kind of guys that are already on more established platforms like Shopify, some of the biggest ones in the world, then it becomes a no-brainer for somebody that's already supporting Bitcoin to begin supporting the Z addresses. And so that's where one of the opportunities I think that the MGRC has is reaching out to these companies that are providing the existing Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash or whatever resources and saying, hey, how can we help you accept Z addresses? And so yeah, that's just one of my experiences.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I'll pause for a little bit more to see if we had any more folks responding to that. Otherwise, I would like to take a 3, 4, 5 minute bathroom break to stretch because we've been on about an hour and a half now. Before the break, anyone want to get in the last comment in response to the topic so far, the last question on Zcash usage stories and best opportunities for MGRC and Zcash? Going once, going twice sort of thing. Speak up. Yeah.
Hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Right, yeah, it was just to a couple of points that other people have made. I really like the idea of a certification system, but to do that, we're going to need to get in outsourced to proper security companies, people with cryptographic experience and people with who have audited some of the ECC's work, people like NCC, stuff like that. And then, but that in itself is going to take quite a lot of time to develop. It's something I'd like to see the MGRC go towards, but I think it might be a little bit too much in the first instance. I think they're going to have too much time setting up all the processes that they're going to need to follow and the future candidates are going to need to follow. And just as for using Zcash, it's been one of my biggest bugbears is that you can't really use it enough. And when you do use it, you're almost always giving up your privacy to actually use it. So I've really been using it to either store funds in or to transact and to move money through other funds and just to give it a little clean on the way through. Really, that's my main uses. I would really like to see it taking off both as a currency, but also as a messaging system. It's something that I would like to see happen. It's something I've been working on in my spare time. So, but I don't think it needs a MGRC grant. But it definitely is going to be the future of Zcash. I think if we can get free Z2C messaging and get it so it's easily to use on a phone and it works fine on a phone, I really think it will be the next big thing. But yeah. I just wanted to say that, so I've said something. Thank you.
Perfect. Very good. Appreciate those points. Okay, let's pause here for about 3 minutes and then come back. You should stretch after sitting in front of a Hangout screen for 90 minutes.
Bathroom break needs to be more than 3 minutes.
What do you think is a good amount of time?
10 minutes.
10 minutes? Is everyone okay with pausing for 10 minutes?
Yep.
Sure, you got it. 10 minutes is on the clock. We'll reconvene in 10 minutes.
6:46.